The moment James Morgan looked up from his teacup to find three identical little girls sliding into the booth across from him, he knew his life would never be the same. Their matching blue dresses and ribbon-tied braids couldn't hide the desperation in their eyes as the one in the middle leaned forward and whispered, "Please, mister. Just for a little while. Pretend you're our father." If you've ever felt that life sometimes presents us with unexpected moments that change everything, this story will touch your heart. Before we dive deeper into James's journey with these mysterious triplets, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories that remind us of the power of human connection. James had been sitting alone at Rosie's diner every Saturday for the past 3 years. It was his ritual: Earl Grey tea, slightly sweetened, and the crossword puzzle from the morning paper. The waitresses knew not to disturb him beyond the occasional refill. This particular Saturday seemed no different until those three little faces appeared across from him, their eyes wide with a mixture of hope and fear. "I'm sorry," James said, setting down his pen. He glanced around the diner, looking for whoever might be responsible for these children. "Please," the girl on the left whispered. "There's a man following us. We told him our dad was meeting us here." James felt a chill run down his spine. He'd worked as a high school counselor for 15 years before taking early retirement after his wife's death. He knew the look of frightened children, and these girls, no more than 8 or 9 years old, were terrified. "That man by the door," the girl on the right murmured, not turning her head. "In the gray jacket." James casually shifted his gaze toward the entrance. A heavy-set man with a scowl was scanning the diner, his eyes narrowing as they landed on the girls. Something about him made James's protective instincts flare immediately. "Well, girls," James said loudly enough to be heard, his voice shifting into the warm tone he'd once used with his own daughter, "I'm so glad you could join your old dad for breakfast. How was your sleepover at Aunt Martha's?" The relief on their faces was immediate and heartbreaking. The middle girl, clearly the spokesperson, played along seamlessly. "It was fun, Daddy. We made cookies and watched movies." James noticed the man in the gray jacket hesitate, then turn and leave the diner. But the knot in his stomach didn't ease. Who were these girls? Where were their parents? And who was that man? "Thank you," the middle girl said, her voice barely audible. "I'm Emma. These are my sisters, Lily and Sophie." "I'm James," he replied, then lowered his voice. "Are you in some kind of trouble? Should I call the police?" The three identical faces looked at each other in silent communication before Emma spoke again. "Please don't. Our mom." Her voice broke, and James saw tears forming in her eyes. "Our mom is in the hospital," Lily continued. "And that man is our mother's boyfriend. He's supposed to be watching us, but he..." She trailed off, unable to finish. "He hurts us," Sophie said simply, rolling up her sleeve to reveal a bruise that made James's blood run cold. In that moment, James Morgan, a man who had spent 3 years in a fog of grief after losing both his wife and his adult daughter in the same year, felt something awaken inside him. A purpose. A responsibility. "Girls," he said carefully, "I need to help you, but I need to know more. Is your mother aware of what's happening?" Emma shook her head. "She's been sick for a long time. Cancer. She doesn't know what he does when she's not around. We tried to tell her once, but he convinced her we were making it up because we don't like him." James nodded, his mind racing. He'd seen this scenario play out too many times in his career: vulnerable children, a parent too ill to protect them, and a predator who knew exactly how to manipulate the situation. "Are you hungry?" he asked, noticing how thin they looked. 3 heads nodded in unison. James waved over Doris, the waitress who had been refilling his tea for years. Her eyebrows rose at the sight of the 3 girls. "Well, James Morgan," she said with a smile, "I didn't know you had company today." "These are my friends," James said carefully. "They're joining me for breakfast." Doris seemed to sense something in his tone. She'd known James since before his wife died, had watched him retreat into himself afterward. The concern in his eyes now told her everything she needed to know. "Well, what can I get for you lovely ladies?" she asked, her voice warm but her eyes questioning as they met James's. After the girls ordered pancakes with extra syrup, scrambled eggs, and orange juice, Doris leaned close to James. "Everything okay?" she whispered. "I'll let you know," he murmured back. As the girls ate, James gently coaxed their story from them. Their mother, Catherine Wilson, had been diagnosed with stage 4 ovarian cancer 2 years ago. Their father had left when the girls were toddlers. 6 months ago, their mother had started dating Martin Reeves, who had moved in almost immediately. At first, he'd seemed nice enough, but once Catherine's treatments intensified and she spent more time in the hospital, Martin had shown his true colors. "He drinks a lot," Sophie explained between bites of pancake. "And then he gets mad about everything. Last night was really bad," Emma added. "Mom had to go back to the hospital suddenly, and he was so angry about having to watch us again. We waited until he passed out this morning," Lily said. "Then we left. We were just walking, trying to figure out what to do, when we saw him driving around looking for us. That's when we came in here," Emma finished. "We thought we could hide, but then he came in too, and we saw you sitting alone and you needed a dad," James said softly. 3 pairs of identical blue eyes looked up at him, filled with a trust that made his heart ache. "My mom always says that when you don't know what to do, find a safe person," Lily said. "You looked safe." James felt something crack inside him, the hard shell of grief that had encased his heart for 3 years. These girls had chosen him, out of everyone in the diner, because he looked safe. The irony wasn't lost on him. He hadn't felt like a protector, a safe harbor, since he'd failed to save his own family. "I want to help you," he said finally. "But we need to do this the right way. We need to talk to your mom, and we need to involve the authorities." Fear flashed across their faces. "But what if they send us to different foster homes?" Emma asked. "We've heard about that happening to other kids. We can't be separated." James reached across the table and took her small hand in his. "I won't let that happen," he promised, though he knew it might be a promise he couldn't keep. "First, let's call the hospital and make sure your mom is okay." Using his cell phone, James called the local hospital and asked for Catherine Wilson. To his relief, she was indeed a patient there. The nurse who answered wouldn't give him any information about her condition but agreed to tell Catherine that her daughters were safe and with a friend when she woke up. "Now," James said, "I think we should go to the police station." The girls exchanged worried glances. "I'll be with you the whole time," James assured them. "I used to be a school counselor. I know how the system works, and I know how to advocate for children." After paying the bill, James led the girls to his car, a sensible sedan that still had his wife's favorite air freshener hanging from the rearview mirror. As they drove to the police station, he found himself glancing in the rearview mirror every few seconds, checking on the 3 identical faces in his back seat. They sat close together, holding hands, their eyes taking in everything around them. At the police station, James was grateful to see Officer Sarah Chen at the front desk. She had been a student of his years ago, one he'd helped through a difficult time. "Mr. Morgan," she said, surprised. "It's been a while." "Hello, Sarah," he replied. "I need your help with something important." Over the next 2 hours, James sat with the triplets as they bravely told their story to Officer Chen and a social worker named Marcus who specialized in child welfare cases. The girls showed their bruises, described the neglect and abuse, and explained their mother's situation. James watched with a mixture of pride and heartbreak as they supported each other, sometimes finishing each other's sentences, sometimes squeezing hands when one of them struggled to continue. "We'll need to verify all of this," Marcus explained gently. "And we'll need to speak with your mother. What happens to us now?" Emma asked, her voice small. Marcus and Officer Chen exchanged glances. "Normally, we'd place you in emergency foster care while we investigate," Marcus said. The girls clutched each other's hands tighter. "I could take them," James heard himself say before he'd even fully formed the thought. "Temporarily, of course. Just until you can speak with their mother and sort this out." Everyone turned to look at him. "Mr. Morgan," Marcus began cautiously, "that's a generous offer, but there are protocols." "I'm a former educator with clearances that should still be on file," James interrupted. "I have no criminal record, I own my home, and I have the time and resources to care for them." He took a deep breath. "And they trust me." Officer Chen studied him for a moment. "He's right about his clearances. I can verify that. And I can personally vouch for his character." After a flurry of phone calls, background checks, and paperwork, Marcus made an unprecedented decision. Given the emergency nature of the situation and James's professional background, the girls would be temporarily placed in his care while the investigation proceeded. They would visit their mother in the hospital the next day, accompanied by Marcus. As James drove the girls to his home that afternoon, he felt a strange mixture of terror and purpose. His house had been quiet for so long, first after his wife's death, then after losing his daughter to a car accident just months later. Now it would be filled with the voices of 3 little girls who needed him. "Your house is pretty," Lily said as they pulled into the driveway of his modest colonial. "Thank you," James replied. "It's been a while since I've had guests, so you'll have to forgive me if things aren't perfect." "We don't need perfect," Emma said with a wisdom beyond her years. "We just need safe." The next few days passed in a blur. James took the girls shopping for necessities, set up the guest room and his daughter's old room for them, and accompanied them to a tearful reunion with their mother at the hospital. Catherine Wilson was a pale shadow of a woman, her body ravaged by cancer and treatments, but her love for her daughters was evident in every weak gesture and whispered word. "Thank you," she said to James when the girls stepped out with Marcus to get snacks from the vending machine. "They told me what you did. How you protected them. They're remarkable children," James replied. "You've done an amazing job with them, despite everything." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. "I made a terrible mistake with Martin. I was so afraid of leaving them alone in the world that I rushed into a relationship with someone I barely knew." She gripped James's hand with surprising strength. "The doctors say I don't have much time left. Weeks, maybe a month. I've been trying to make arrangements, but there's no family left to take them." James felt his heart constrict. "What will happen to them?" "Foster care, most likely," she whispered. "And I'm terrified they'll be separated. They've never been apart, not for a single day. They need each other." Before James could respond, the girls returned with Marcus, arms full of chips and candy. The conversation turned to lighter topics, but Catherine's words echoed in James's mind long after they left the hospital. That night, after tucking the girls into bed, an act that felt both foreign and strangely familiar, James sat at his kitchen table with a cup of tea gone cold. On the refrigerator, the girls had already hung drawings they'd made that afternoon. Their backpacks sat by the door, ready for school the next day. Marcus had arranged for them to continue attending their regular school, with James driving them. In just 3 days, these 3 little girls had brought life back into his home and purpose back into his days. He thought about his daughter, Rebecca, who had always wanted children but never had the chance. He thought about his wife, Margaret, who had been the most nurturing person he'd ever known. What would they think of this situation? The answer came to him with surprising clarity. They would tell him to open his heart again. To help these children who had, by some twist of fate, found their way to him. The next morning, James called Marcus and asked about the process for becoming a foster parent. By the end of the week, he had submitted an application and begun the required training. Catherine, when told of his intentions, wept with relief. "I've only known you a short time," she told him during their next visit, "but I see how the girls light up around you. They trust you. And somehow, I do too." As the weeks passed, James and the triplets fell into a routine. School, homework, dinner together every night. He learned that Emma loved to read and could lose herself in books for hours. Lily was the artist, covering every available surface with her drawings. Sophie was the practical one, organizing their belongings and making lists of things they needed. They were different despite their identical appearances, each with her own personality and quirks. They also had nightmares. Sometimes one would wake screaming, sometimes all three. James would sit with them, speaking softly until they fell back asleep. During the day, loud noises could make them flinch. They apologized constantly for the smallest things, spilling a drop of water, leaving a toy out, speaking too loudly. The signs of abuse were there, and James worked with a child psychologist to help them feel secure again. Catherine's condition deteriorated rapidly. By the third week, she was moved to hospice care. James brought the girls to see her every day after school, watching as they climbed carefully onto her bed, mindful of the tubes and wires, to tell her about their day. "They're happier than I've seen them in a long time," Catherine told James during one visit while the girls were drawing pictures in the corner of her room. "Even with everything happening, they feel safe with you." "I'm trying my best," James said. Catherine reached for his hand. "I need to ask you something impossible," she whispered. "Something I have no right to ask." James knew what was coming. He'd seen it in her eyes for days. "Would you consider adopting them? After I'm gone?" Her voice broke. "I know it's too much to ask. You didn't sign up for this. But they need someone who loves them, who will keep them together, who will remember to tell them about me." James thought about his quiet house, his solitary life before the triplets had slid into his booth at Rosie's diner. He thought about the sound of their laughter as they played in his backyard, the way they'd begun to relax around him, to trust that they were truly safe. "It's not too much to ask," he said finally. "If the girls wanted to, nothing would make me happier." The conversation with the triplets happened that evening, in Catherine's hospice room. Their mother explained, in simple terms, that she would be going to heaven soon. That she loved them more than anything in the world. That she wanted them to stay together, to be happy, to remember her. "Mr. James has offered to be your dad," she said, her voice weak but determined. "To adopt all three of you and keep you together. But only if that's what you want." The girls looked at James with identical expressions of hope and uncertainty. "Would we live in your house?" Sophie asked practically. "Yes," James replied. "You'd have your own rooms, go to your same school. Nothing would change except that I'd be your dad legally." "Would we have to call you Dad?" Lily asked, her voice small. "You can call me whatever makes you comfortable," James assured her. "James is fine. Or Mr. James, like you do now." Emma, always the most perceptive, studied him carefully. "Would you be sad sometimes? About your wife and daughter?" "Mom told us about them." James felt his throat tighten. "Yes," he admitted. "I'll always miss them. But being sad about them doesn't mean I can't be happy with you too. The heart has room for all kinds of feelings at once." The girls huddled together, whispering among themselves in that secret language that only they seemed to understand. Finally, Emma spoke for all of them. "We want to stay with you," she said. "But we want to remember Mom too." "Always," James promised. "We'll talk about her every day if you want. She'll always be your mother." Catherine's tears fell freely now. "Then it's settled," she whispered. "My girls will have a father again." 2 weeks later, Catherine Wilson passed away peacefully in her sleep, with James.